Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. Road to Perdition 2002 Movie Review. Road to Perdition is a 2002 American epic crime drama film directed by Sam Mendes and written by David Sell, based on the first volume of the DC Comics graphic novel series of the same name by Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner. It stars Tom Hanks, Tyler Hoechlin, Paul Newman in his final live-action theatrical film role, Jude Law, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Stanley Tucci, and Daniel Craig. Set in 1931 during the Great Depression, the film follows a mob enforcer and his son as they seek vengeance against the mobster who murdered the rest of their family. The film explores themes such as father-son relationships and the consequences of violence. Road to Perdition was screened at the 59th Venice International Film Festival on August 31, 2002, where it was nominated for the Golden Lion. The film was theatrically released in the United States on July 12, 2002, and was a box office success, grossing $183.4 million against its $80 million budget. Critics received it well and praised Mendes' direction, Conrad L. Hall's cinematography, and the cast's performances. At the 75th Academy Awards, the film was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Newman, Best Original Score, Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Art Direction. Hall was posthumously awarded the Oscar for Best Cinematography. In the winter of 1931, Michael Sullivan Sr. is an orphaned enforcer of Irish mob boss John Rooney in Rock Island, Illinois. His wife Annie knows of his work, but his two sons Michael Jr. and Peter do not. Rooney's associate Finn McGovern speaks at his brother's wake, insinuating that Rooney is responsible for his brother's death. Rooney sends his son Connor and Sullivan to talk with McGovern. Michael follows them and watches the interaction from hiding. McGovern denies that his brother stole anything from the mob and implies that Connor was responsible, which causes Connor to murder McGovern and Sullivan to shoot the other armed witnesses in self-defense. The men discover that Michael saw everything and swear him to secrecy. Rooney sends Sullivan to collect a debt from speakeasy owner Tony Calvino. Jealous and paranoid, Connor sends a letter with Sullivan for Calvino. Calvino reads the letter and reaches for his revolver, but Sullivan kills him and his bodyguard. The letter reads, "Kill Sullivan and all debts are paid." Sullivan rushes home and discovers that Connor, suspecting Michael has told others of the murders, has already murdered Annie and Peter. Michael was unharmed, as he had arrived home late from detention. Sullivan and Michael flee Rock Island and head to Chicago to meet mobster Frank Nitti. Sullivan offers to work for the Chicago outfit in exchange for permission to kill Connor. Nitti rejects his offer and advises Sullivan against seeking revenge. Rooney, listening next door with Connor, reluctantly allows Nitti to dispatch contract killer Harlan McGuire, whom Nitti orders to kill Sullivan. Sullivan plans to take Michael to his aunt's beach house in Perdition as a haven. McGuire tracks them to a roadside diner, where he and Sullivan converse casually while Michael sleeps in the car. Sensing danger, Sullivan escapes from McGuire with Michael, and McGuire kills a police officer in the process. Sullivan realizes McGuire knows their destination, and begins robbing the banks that hold the outfit's money, hoping to pressure the outfit into withdrawing their protection from Connor. Sullivan teaches Michael to drive so that he can act as a getaway driver. When the mob withdraws its money from its banks, Sullivan interrogates Rooney's accountant, Alexander Rance. Rance stalls Sullivan until McGuire appears with a shotgun. During the shootout and escape, McGuire and Sullivan wound each other and Rance is killed in the crossfire. Sullivan collapses from his wound, and Michael drives them to a farm where an elderly couple helps Sullivan recover. The ledgers reveal that Connor has been embezzling from his father using dead men's names, including McGovern's. Believing that Rooney will give up Connor once he knows the truth, Sullivan returns to Rock Island and confronts Rooney, who is already aware of Connor's treachery. Sullivan states that Connor will be dead anyway once Rooney dies. Rooney still refuses to give up his son, urging Sullivan to flee with Michael and raise him to be a better man than either of them. Sullivan later ambushes and kills Rooney's bodyguards before reluctantly killing Rooney. Nitti reveals Connor's location after Sullivan promises to end the feud with Connor's death. Sullivan goes to the hotel room where Connor is hiding and kills him. The Sullivans finally reach the beach house in Perdition. While Michael is outside, Sullivan enters the house, where McGuire shoots him in the back. Michael appears and points a gun at McGuire, and Sullivan fatally shoots McGuire while he is distracted. Sullivan is happy that his son did not shoot, and then dies in Michael's arms. Michael drives the car back to the elderly couple's farm and stays with them. In his narration, Michael states he has not held a gun since his father's death, and when asked if his father was a good man, he simply answers, "He was my father." When Max Allan Collins wrote the graphic novel Road to Perdition, his book agent saw potential in the story as a film adaptation and showed it to a film agent. By 1999, the novel had reached Dean Zanuck, who is the vice president of development at the company owned by his father, producer Richard D. Zanuck. The novel was sent to the elder Zanuck in Morocco, who is there producing Rules of Engagement, 2000. The Zanucks agreed on the story's prospect and sent it to director-producer Steven Spielberg. Shortly afterward, Spielberg set up the project at his studio DreamWorks, though he did not pursue the film's direction due to his full slate. Sam Mendes sought a new project after completing American Beauty, 1999, and explored prospects including A Beautiful Mind, KPX, The Shipping News, and The Lookout. DreamWorks sent Mendes Road to Perdition as a prospect, and Mendes was attracted to the story, considering it narratively very simple, but thematically very complex. Mendes specified one theme being that the parents' world is inaccessible to their children. Mendes considered the story's theme to be about how children deal with violence and whether exposure to violence would render children violent themselves. Mendes described the script as having no moral absolutes, a factor that appealed to the director. Spielberg first contacted screenwriter David Self to adapt the story into a feature film. Self wrote an initial draft that remained close to the source material and retained most of its dialogue. The screenplay was then rewritten by uncredited writers, distancing the script from the graphic novel but leaving the core elements of the story intact. Some of the harsher aspects of the story were toned down as the script became more streamlined. For example, in some early drafts of the screenplay, Sullivan became an alcoholic, but this element was ultimately absent from the final version. The story is deeply informed by the Lone Wolf and Cub manga series. Novelist Max Allan Collins acknowledged the influence of Lone Wolf and Cub on his graphic novel Road to Perdition in an interview with the BBC, declaring that Road to Perdition is an unabashed homage to Lone Wolf and Cub. Some characters' names were slightly changed from their original versions in the graphic novel. The surname of the real-life gangsters John Looney and his son Connor were changed to Rooney, and the surname of Tom Hanks' character and his family was streamlined from the original O'Sullivan to simply Sullivan. One significant addition to the script was the creation of Maguire to provide a persistent element of pursuit to the Sullivans' departure from the old world. Hanks and cinematographer Conrad Hall requested Mendes to limit violence in the film to meaningful acts rather than gratuitous carnage. Hanks' character, Michael Sullivan, is known as the Angel of Death and invokes fear in those around him, but his infamy is downplayed in the film. Mendes, who described the graphic novel as much more pulpy, sought to reduce the graphic novel's background to its essence, seeking the nonverbal simplicity of films like Once Upon a Time in America, 1984, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, 1973, and films by Akira Kurosawa that lack dialogue. Duplicate language in characters' confrontations in Road to Perdition was trimmed to the absolute minimum. Mendes described Road to Perdition as a poetic, elegiac story, in which the pictures tell the true story. An example of one such unspoken scene in the film was the piano duet between Rooney and Michael Sr., intended to convey their relationship without words. In the final 20 minutes of Road to Perdition, the script was written to have only 6 lines of dialogue. Max Allan Collins originally wanted to write the adapted screenplay, but was not given the opportunity. Collins chose to stay out of the scripting process out of respect for the different writing styles for a different medium, though he served as a consultant. Collins praised the addition of Maguire and considered the minimalist use of dialogue to be appropriate. The author also applauded the film's version of Rooney as more overtly a father figure to Sullivan. Collins opposed the profanity in the script, as the vulgar language did not fit his vision of the 1930s. Collins also contested the path of Sullivan's son in the film. In the graphic novel, the son kills once. In the film, Michael does not kill anyone. Collins also disagreed with the film's narration technique. In the novel, the son narrates the story as an adult, becoming a priest, while in the film, Michael narrates while still a young boy. Tom Hanks was sent a copy of the graphic novel by Steven Spielberg while he was filming Cast Away. Initially too busy to make sense of the story, Hanks later received David Self's adapted screenplay, which he became attached to. Hanks, a father to 4 children, described Michael Sullivan's role, "I just got this guy. If you're a man, and you've got offspring, emotionally, it's devastating. Tyler Hoechlin was chosen from over 2,000 candidates to portray Michael Sullivan's son. The actor was 13 years old while filming. In scenes in which Hoechlin's character assists his father as a getaway driver, Hoechlin is trained by a driving instructor. Paul Newman was unanimously the first choice for the role of John Rooney. The actor prepared by requesting Frank McCourt, the Irish-American author of Angela's Ashes, to record a tape of his voice. David Self, who created the Maguire character, explained, "He gets so jaded from exposure to this world, he steps over the line from being the storyteller to being the storymaker." To capture the seedy countenance of the character, Jude Law was given a sallow skin tone that reflected the wear from working in a darkroom. Law's teeth also received a lower gum line and had a rotted look. Law was also given a weak, thinning hairline. Maguire's apartment also displays a collection of photographs of dead bodies, some of them actual police stills from the 1930s. Stanley Tucci was selective about roles in gangster films, believing that Hollywood stereotyped Italian Americans as gangsters. However, attracted by the prospect of working with Mendes, the actor accepted the role of Nitti, a real-life mob boss from Chicago. Anthony LaPaglia was cast as Al Capone and filmed a single scene, which was omitted from the final cut, and can be found in the DVD's deleted scenes. Mendes believed that Capone was more menacing as an unseen presence. Actor Alfred Molina was approached to portray Capone, but Molina was forced to turn the role down due to scheduling conflicts with Frida, 2002. Mendes sought to produce a period film that avoided gangster genre cliches. Mendes chose to film Road to Perdition on location in Chicago, Illinois, including downtown at the University Club of Chicago, the Chicago neighborhood of Pullman, the Charles G. Dawes House in Evanston, Illinois, as well as the far west Chicago suburb of Geneva, Illinois. General Jones Armory, the state's largest location mainstay, which houses units of the Illinois National Guard, was provided to the studio by the Illinois State Film Commission. Sets were built inside the armory, including the interiors of the Sullivan family's home and the Rooney Mansion. The availability of an inside location provided the crew complete control over the lighting environment, which was established with the rigging of scaffoldings. Mendes collaborated with costume designer Albert Volsky, production designer Dennis Gassner, and cinematographer Conrad Hall to design the film's style. Volsky designed costumes that were very controlled, with soft outlines and very soft silhouettes. Gassner built sets that could capture the cold look of the era. Mendes sought a muted palette for the film, having dark backgrounds and sets with dark, muted greens and grays. Mendes filmed Road to Perdition using the Super 35 format. The director filmed exterior scenes in Illinois in the winter and the spring of 2001, using real weather conditions such as snow, rain, and mud for the scenes. Mendes considered the usage of bleak weather conditions and the intended coldness of Gassner's exterior locations to define the characters' emotional states. Pullman became a key location to reflect this theme, having several settings, including the town's historic Florence Hotel, easily redressed by the crew for the film. Filming concluded in June 2001. To establish the lighting of scenes in Road to Perdition, Mendes drew from the paintings of Edward Hopper as a source of inspiration, particularly Hopper's New York movie, 1939. Mendes and cinematographer Conrad Hall sought to convey similar atmospheric lighting for the film scenes, applying a less is more mantra. Hall also shot at wide apertures that retained one point in the depth of field sharply focused. Hall considered the technique to provide an emotional dimension to the scenes. The cinematographer also used unconventional techniques and materials to create unique lighting effects. One of Hall's methods was to use black silk in daylight exterior scenes to filter the light enough to create an in-shade look. Hall purposely distanced the camera from Hank's character, Michael Sullivan Sr., at the beginning of the film to establish the perspective of Sullivan's son, who is unaware of his father's true nature. Hanks's character was filmed as partially obscured and seen through doorways, and his entrances and exits took place in shadows. A wide lens was used to maintain a distance from the character. Shots in the film were drawn directly from panels in the graphic novel, illustrated by Richard Piers Rayner. An instance of the direct influence is the scene in which Michael Jr. looks up at the Chicago skyline from the vehicle, with the skyline reflected in the vehicle's glass. A seamless 40-second driving scene, in which Michael Sullivan and his son travel into Chicago from the countryside, was aided by visual effects. The live-action part of the scene was filmed at LaSalle Street, and due to the lack of scenery for part of the drive down LaSalle Street, the background of Balboa Drive was included with the use of visual effects. The film's title, Road to Perdition, is both Michael Sullivan's and his son's destination town and a euphemism for hell, a road that Sullivan desires to prevent his son from traveling. Sullivan, who chooses his violent path early on in life, considers himself irredeemable and seeks to save his son from a similar fate. Said Mendes is in a battle for the soul of his son. Can a man who has led a bad life achieve redemption through his child? Hanks described Sullivan as a man who achieved a comfortable status through violent means, whose likely repercussions he ignored. Sullivan is a good father and husband, but also has a job that requires him to be a violent killer. The film explores this paradoxical dichotomy. When Sullivan is faced with the consequences, Hanks says, at the moment we're dropped into the story, it is literally the last day of that false perspective. To keep Sullivan from justifying his violent actions in the film, Mendes omitted scenes in the final cut that had Sullivan explaining his background to his son. In the film, most of the numerous acts of violence are committed off-screen. The violent acts were also designed to be quick, reflecting the actual speed of violence in the real world. The focus was not on the direct victims of the perpetuated violence but on the impact of violence on the perpetrators or witnesses to the act. The film also explores father-son relationships between Michael Sullivan and his son, Sullivan and his boss, John Rooney, and between Rooney and his son Connor. Sullivan simultaneously idolizes and fears Rooney, and Sullivan's son feels the same about his father. Rooney's son, Connor, has none of Sullivan's redeeming qualities, and Rooney is conflicted about whom to protect, his biological son or his surrogate son. Connor is jealous of his father's relationship with Sullivan, which fuels his actions, ultimately causing a domino effect that drives the film. Because Sullivan shields his background from his son, his attempt to preserve the father-son relationship is actually harmful. Tragedy brings Sullivan and his son together. Sullivan escapes from the old world with his son, and the boy finds an opportunity to strengthen the relationship with his father. Tyler Hoechlin, who portrayed Michael Jr., explained, his dad starts to realize that Michael is all he has now and how much he's been missing. I think the journey is of a father and son getting to know each other, and also finding out who they themselves are. Rain served as a motif in the film. It was developed after research for the wake scene at the beginning of the film informed the director that corpses were kept on ice in the 1930s to keep bodies from decomposing. The notion was interwoven into the film, which linked the presence of rain with death. Mendes reflected on the theme, the linking of rain with death, speaks of the mutability of rain and links to the uncontrollability of fate. These are things that humans can't control. With filming concluding in June 2001, the studio hoped for a United States release for Thanksgiving or the following Christmas. However, in September 2001, Mendes requested a little bit more time. So it was rescheduled for release this time on July 12, 2002, an unconventional move that placed the drama among the action-oriented summer films. Max Allan Collins, who authored the graphic novel, was hired to write the novelization for the film adaptation. Collins initially turned in a draft that contained 90,000 words, but the licensing at DreamWorks required the author to use only the dialogue from the film and no additional dialogue. Collins reluctantly edited the novelization down to 50,000 words and later said he regretted taking on the task. In 2016, Brash Books published Collins' original version of the novelization as Road to Perdition, the new, expanded edition. Road to Perdition was released on DVD by DreamWorks Home Entertainment on February 25, 2003, in both full-screen and anamorphic widescreen versions. The DVD's features included an audio commentary, deleted scenes, an HBO making-of documentary, and a photo gallery. Work on the DVD began on the same day the film's production began, and a collaborative effort among the director, the studio, and the DVD production crew shaped the DVD's content. Due to the limited space on the DVD, the film's deleted scenes were chosen over a DTS soundtrack. Instead, the DVD included a Dolby Digital 5.1 soundtrack. A special edition DVD containing both DTS and Dolby Digital 5.1 soundtracks was also released, excluding the making-of documentary to fit both soundtracks. Road to Perdition was released on Blu-ray disc by Paramount Home Entertainment on August 3, 2010, featuring a widescreen transfer, a DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 soundtrack, and all of the features from the DVD release. In February 2006, Viacom, now known as Paramount Skydance, acquired the domestic rights to Road to Perdition, along with the rights to all 58 other live-action films DreamWorks had released since 1997, following their $1.6 billion acquisition of the company's live-action assets. In March 2019, the film's international rights transferred to the Walt Disney Company, after Rupert Murdoch sold most of 21st Century Fox's film and television assets to Disney. The film has since been made available to stream on Disney Plus in international markets. In the United States, the film was made available on Paramount Plus. Road to Perdition opened in 1,798 theaters in its debut weekend, competing against several other new releases, including Reign of Fire, Halloween, Resurrection, and The Crocodile Hunter: Collision Course. It ended up grossing $22.1 million, placing second to holdover Men in Black 2. The film then beat Men in Black and Stuart Little 2 to reach the #1 spot during its second weekend with $15.4 million. It grossed $104 million in the United States and $79.3 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $183.4 million. Road to Perdition received positive reviews from critics, with Conrad L. Hall's cinematography, the production design, and the lead performances of Hanks and Newman being praised. Review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes gives the film an approval rating of based on 213 reviews, with an average rating of the site's critical consensus reads, somber, stately, and beautifully mounted. Sam Mendes' Road to Perdition is a well-crafted mob movie that explores the ties between fathers and sons. Metacritic gave the film a weighted average score of 72 out of 100, based on 36 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of scale. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times praised Hall's cinematography and the thematic use of water. He also felt emotionally detached from the characters, saying, "I knew I admired it, but I didn't know if I liked it. It is cold and holds us outside." Kirk Honeycutt of The Hollywood Reporter praised Hanks, Newman, and Craig but called Law's performance almost cartoonish. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone also complimented Hanks and Newman, act together with the confidence of titans, their talents in the service of character, never star ego. Travers cited Hall's breathtaking cinematography and composer Thomas Newman's evocative score. Paul Clinton of CNN said, "While these deeply human issues are touched upon, they're never fully explored, and that undermines the sense of greatness to which this movie obviously aspires." Clinton considered Craig's character one-dimensional to the extreme. He found the cinematography too overpowering for the film's storyline, which he considered weak. Jay Hoberman of The Village Voice described the film as grim yet soppy. He added, "The action is stilted and the tabloid energy embalmed." Stephen Hunter of The Washington Post thought that the script lost its path when Sullivan and his son fled their old life. Eleanor Ringel Gillespie of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution enjoyed the film's cinematography, Depression-era setting, and the performances of Hanks and Newman. Gillespie wished the film lasted a little longer to explore its emotional core further. Eric Harrison of the Houston Chronicle considered Road to Perdition the most brilliant work in this genre since the uncut Once Upon a Time in America, 1984. Harrison considered Self's script so finely honed that the story can change directions in a heartbeat. Road to Perdition is like a Greek tragedy, dealing out remorseless fates for all the characters. Some tragedies, like Hamlet, are exhilarating, because we have little idea how quirks of character will bring about the final doom. But the impact of Greek tragedy seems muted to me, because it's preordained. Since Road to Perdition is in that tradition, it loses something. It has been compared to The Godfather, but The Godfather was about characters with free will, and here the characters seem to be performing actions already long since inscribed in the books of their lives. Yet the movie has other strengths to compensate for the implacable progress of its plot. It is wonderfully acted. And no movie this year will be more praised for its cinematography. Conrad L. Hall's work seems certain to win the Academy Award. He creates a limbo of darkness, shadow, night, fearful faces half seen, cold and snow. His characters stand in downpours, the rain running off the brims of their fedoras and soaking the shoulders of their thick wool overcoats. Their feet must always be cold. The photography creates a visceral chill. The story involves 3 sets of fathers and sons, 2 biological, the 3rd emotional, and shows how the lives they lead make ordinary love between them impossible. Tom Hanks plays Michael Sullivan, an enforcer for the Rock Island branch of the Chicago mob, circa 1931. Tyler Hoechlin plays his son Michael Jr., a solemn-eyed 12-year-old. After his brother Peter asks, "What does Dad do for a job?" Michael Jr. decides to find out for himself. One night he hides in a car, goes along for the ride, and sees a man killed. Not by his father, but what difference does it make? Sullivan works for John Rooney, Paul Newman, the mob boss, who is trim and focused and uses few words. John's son Connor, Daniel Craig, is a member of the mob. Sullivan finds out that Connor has been stealing from his father, and that sets up the movie's emotional showdown, because Sullivan thinks of John like his own father, and John speaks of Sullivan as a son. "Your mother knows I love Mr. Rooney," Michael Sr. tells his son. "When we had nothing, he gave us a home." Men who name their sons after themselves presumably hope the child will turn out a little like them. This is not the case with Michael Sr., who has made a pact with evil in order to support his wife, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and 2 boys in comfort. Unlike Rooney, he doesn't want his son in the business. The movie's plot asks whether it is possible for fathers to spare their sons from the costs of their sins. It also involves sons who feel they are not the favorite. "Did you like Peter better than me?" Michael Jr. asks his father, after his little brother has been killed. And later Sullivan goes to see Mr. Rooney, and cannot understand why Rooney would protect his son Connor, who betrayed and stole from him, to his loyal employee who is like a son. The movie is directed by Sam Mendes, from a graphic novel by Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner, much revised by screenwriter David Self. This is only Mendes' second film, but recall that his first, American Beauty, won Oscars in 1999 for Best Picture, Director, Actor, Screenplay, and Cinematography, by Conrad Hall. Both films involve men in family situations of unbearable pain, although the first is a comedy, of sorts, and this one certainly is not. Both involve a father who, by leading the life he chooses, betrays his family and even endangers them. Both involve men who hate their work. The key relationships are between Hanks and Newman, and Hanks and Hoechlin, the newcomer who plays his son. Newman plays Rooney as a man who would prefer that as few people be harmed as necessary, but he has an implacable definition of necessary. He is capable of colorful Corleone-style sayings, as when he declares that his mob will not get involved in labor unions. "What men do after work is what made us rich. No need to screw them at work." Against this benevolence we must set his trade in booze, gambling and women, and his surgical willingness to amputate any associate who is causing difficulty. The Hanks character sees the good side of Rooney so willfully that he almost cannot see the bad. Even after he discovers the worst, he feels wounded more than betrayed. He's a little naive, and it takes Rooney, in a speech Newman delivers with harsh clarity, to disabuse him. Called a murderer, Rooney says, "There are only murderers in this room, Michael. Open your eyes. This is the life we chose. The life we lead. And there is only one guarantee: none of us will see heaven." Sullivan wants his son to see heaven, and that sets up their flight from Rooney justice. Father and son flee, pursued by a hitman, Jude Law, who supplements his income by selling photographs of the people he has killed. The plot all works out in an ending that may seem too neat, unless you reflect that in tragedy there is a place of honor for the deus ex machina, the god being lowered by the machinery of the plot into a scene that requires solution. I mentioned the rain. This is a water-soaked picture, with melting snow on the streets and dampness in every room. That gives Conrad Hall the opportunity to develop and extend one of his most famous shots. In Cold Blood, 1967, he has a close-up of Robert Blake as a convicted killer on the night of his death. He puts Blake near a window and lights his face through the windowpane as raindrops slide down the glass. The effect is of tears on his face. In Road to Perdition, the light shines through a rain-swept window onto a whole room that seems to weep. After I saw Road to Perdition, I knew I admired it, but I didn't know if I liked it. I am still not sure. It is cold and holds us outside. Yes, there is the love of Hanks for his son, but how sadly he is forced to express it. The troubles of the mob seem caused because Rooney prefers family to good management, but Michael Sullivan's tragedy surely comes because he has put it the other way around, placing Rooney above his family. The movie shares with The Godfather the useful tactic of keeping the actual victims out of view. There are no civilians here, destroyed by mob activities. All of the characters, good and bad, are supplied from within the mob. But there is never the sense that any of these characters will tear loose, think laterally, break the chains of their fate. Choice, a luxury of the Corleones, is denied to the Sullivans and Rooneys, and choice or its absence is the difference between Sophocles and Shakespeare. I prefer Shakespeare. When Road to Perdition was released on July 12, 2002, it caused a mini-stir. Audiences weren't sure if they would be able to buy Tom Hanks in a morally flexible role. The film had the benefit of being director Sam Mendes' follow-up to the massively successful American Beauty, though, and as such, had creative leeway. Based on Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner's graphic novel, which was in turn heavily inspired by the legendary Lone Wolf and Cub manga series, Mendes, screenwriter David Self, and the impressive cast craft a minor masterpiece. Though not without flaws, I'm glad I revisited the film for its 20th anniversary. Mike Sullivan, an understated but emotionally resonant Hanks, is a loyal and respected high-level mob enforcer in the Prohibition-era Quad Cities area. A World War I vet and stern family man, he owes everything to fatherly mob boss John Rooney, the legendary Paul Newman in one of his final roles. Curious about his father's work, Mike's oldest son Michael, future Superman Tyler Hoechlin, secretly follows him to a job where he witnesses Rooney's son Connor, cruel and craven Daniel Craig, kill a fellow gangster. After being discovered, Michael swears to keep the bloody secret. However, Connor is resentful of Mike's relationship with his father and attempts to bend the situation to his advantage, initiating a plot that puts Mike and John in an unavoidable collision course. The film also features Jennifer Jason Leigh in what amounts to an extended cameo, Karen Hines as a disgruntled mobster, Stanley Tucci as a sympathetic but unhelpful colleague, and Dylan Baker as a foppish crooked bookkeeper. Perhaps my favorite performance, however, is Jude Law's turn as the repulsive hitman and crime scene photographer hired to end Mike's relentless quest for vengeance. Really, all the performances are remarkable, though. Hanks plays Mike as a man who doesn't enjoy violence but who will effectively employ it if the need arises. Wanting to emphasize the visuals, Mendes and self-limited dialogue, allowing their performers to tell the story with body language, and cinematographer Conrad Hall to present wordless but impactful scenery. Hall would win an Oscar for his lush and elegant work. Beautiful and elegiac, Hall's work is a huge part of the film's appeal. The sequence where Mike confronts John in an evening downpour is particularly stunning. The production design is also outstanding, with costumes, sets, and especially the vintage vehicles bursting off the screen with impressive texture and detail. Thomas Newman's score is fantastic, too. At turns melancholy, thrilling, and wistful, it perfectly complements the visuals and somber toned. I only have a few minor nitpicks with the piece. It briefly sags a bit in the middle when Mike and his son form a deeper bond. Though essential to the narrative, it doesn't quite work and clashes tonally with the rest of the feature. I'd also say that the voiceover narration at the beginning and end of the film betrays the confidence of the visual storytelling and is a bit too on the nose. It's particularly aggrieving at the conclusion where Jill Bilcock's editing is more than sufficient to convey the work's parting message. Despite a few missteps, Sam Mendes' Road to Perdition is effectively lyrical and haunting. You've probably seen the basic story before. Gladiator and John Wick both come to mind, but the creative choice to tell the tale through imagery sets it apart. And make no mistake, it's a gorgeous flick. Tom Hanks doesn't go full-on bad guy, but he admirably tackles a character that's grayer than his typical role. 20 years later, the film seems to be a footnote. I myself dismissed it at the time as being a well-crafted but forgettable effort. However, I now appreciate its themes about fatherhood and its ability to convey the story in a purely cinematic way. It is recommended for fans of Tommy guns, period filmmaking, and conflicted gangsters. Hey everyone, it's Kernuk here. When I was asked to review this movie, I found myself rather surprised. The Road to Perdition is a strange film, all things considered. I'd hesitate to call it a masterpiece, and yet I'd also say that it's above average in quality. This is a sad fact once you realize this is one of the last great roles that Paul Newman ever had. I'm torn with how to deal with this film, because if you just want a dark movie about crime, it'll be good for that. Trust me, there's plenty of drama and violence to go around. What it isn't good for is trying to tell a thoughtful and compelling narrative. The film lacks restraint or remorse, hammering out tragic fates for all the characters with an intent that has no grace. It doesn't care for grace, only hard and fast cruelty under the guise of loyalty. If that's something that interests you, then this neo-noir drama might be up your alley. That being said, it isn't up my alley at all these days. Like a vast many films of this nature, it likes to pretend to be intelligent. Even the name is absolutely pompous, like an art house film without the art. Right off the bat, just by looking at the name, religious symbology smacks us in the face. In Christian theology, perdition references a state of being in which there is no redemption. Think doom and gloom, eternal punishment and damnation here. Road to perdition, when correctly defined then, actually reads Road to Eternal Damnation. I'll let you decide which title correctly reflects the mood of the film. With a name like that, I was expecting a little bit more class and a lot less convoluted nonsense. The film is a tragedy, but therein rests the issue. I knew that going into the film. That means I had a baseline expectation, simply because of the title and the trailer. With quotes in the movie like "none of us will see heaven" and all of the Christian symbology, it pretends to be much more philosophical than it really is. There's little in the way of mindful foreshadowing. The film would rather beat you over the head with its symbolism like a rock to the forehead. The movie might be aimed at adults, but there's little in the way of emotional maturity here. Of course, what good is heavy-handed religious symbolism without a firm disregard for it? Yes, that was a question asked in sarcasm. These religious undertones are mixed with a healthy dose of brutality, extortion, and murder. Several of the people in the film attempt to live a much more pious life. They simply fail so terribly that it's entirely laughable in the first place. The whole sordid situation is played under the context of a double life for Michael Sullivan, as if that somehow excuses him for his scummy ways. Several characters are self-sacrificing in a way. The film seems to impart that for a great number of these men, the family unit is much more important than his own livelihood. On the surface, that might be true. Yet these two themes clash in a way that offers very little virtue at all. The film takes place during the Great Depression. Embroiled in a crime syndicate, the families are torn between hard crime and familial devotion. Three sets of fathers and sons struggle upon this precipice. Tom Hanks plays the enforcer Michael Sullivan, a member of the mob. Tyler Hoechlin plays his son Michael Jr., a mere 12-year-old boy. The curious child tries to discover what his father does for a living. One night, the wayward youth hides in his father's car. Then, he watches a man be killed by mob boss John Rooney, played by Paul Newman. This would be devastating enough for a good plotline, but as I said, this movie knows nothing about being subtle. To avoid confusion, I'll now be calling Michael Sullivan, the father, Sullivan, and the son Michael simply to avoid confusion. John Rooney's son Connor, played by Daniel Craig, is a member of the mob as well. Connor has been stealing from his father, and that's the heart of this supposedly tragic drama. Sullivan holds John in high regard, treating him as his own father figure. This bond goes both ways. John treats Sullivan as a son, so needless to say, Sullivan takes issue with Connor in more ways than one. A rather notable quote stands out to highlight this. Passed down from Sullivan to Michael, "Your mother knows I love Mr. Rooney. When we had nothing, he gave us a home." I won't attempt to distill the rest of the plot into a few paragraphs. It would be rife with contradiction, none of it succulent or even engaging to ponder about. The movie just isn't built for that kind of complex analysis. The movie is directed by Sam Mendes, and it's based upon a graphic novel by Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner. The damn thing is heavily revised by screenwriter David Self. Take that as you will. When I watched Road to Perdition, as a teenager, I liked it a lot. These days, as an adult, I find it to be absolute crap. It tries to debate complicated moral ethos with the brute force of a jackhammer. Sadly, that's the point that really sticks out to me. Nostalgia can't even save this movie for me under direct scrutiny. It would be disingenuous of me to say otherwise. This film has been compared to The Godfather, but you can't compare these two works. It really grinds my gears when people even try to do that. They're entirely separate films. While both of them deal with the pomp and circumstance about the criminal underbelly, one does so without false pretense. Let me be clear here, The Godfather makes no bones about who and what the characters are: mobsters, criminals, bad guys. There is no guise of heroism. However, in Road to Perdition, that narrative gets muddied, all the way down to the move and the trailer itself. No, I'm not joking. The movie does want us to buy into that kind of misguided trite from the onset. It's even in the advertising. All of the characters, good and bad, are neck deep in the mobster lifestyle, and none of them even try to choose a better path. It doesn't matter that Sullivan wants better for his own son Michel, he has no valuable concept of what better even is. Sure enough, Sullivan paved a road to hell, but under no circumstance could anyone say it was done with the best of intentions. While The Godfather offers critical questions about loyalty and the option to choose one's own path upon a silver platter, Road to Perdition spits on the concept. It refuses to take its own pious themes, religious undertones, and family bonds seriously. The class and integrity provided to the Corleone family in one film is abhorrently denied to the Sullivan and Rooney families of the other film. That is why you could never hope to compare these films at all. One is a true film about mobsters and the confines of that lifestyle. The other is a film about glorified street thugs with more firepower and gumption than common sense. The only saving grace Road to Perdition has as a film is that if you don't think about it, then it is an okay film to watch. If you just want to see a simple crime movie play out tragically with no forbearance at all, well, this is the film for you. It'll give you a decent movie night sufficiently as an entertaining criminal romp. There's nothing wrong with a standard popcorn flick, but this is not the popcorn flick for me. If I'm going to watch criminals take the spotlight, I expect a much better baseline respect for themes involved. I first came across Road to Perdition as a blind buy. I was at a Best Buy, or it may have been the now defunct Circuit City, and I glanced Tom Hanks on the cover of a film I hadn't at that time heard of. You see, I was a film lover around 2003, but I wasn't someone who knew a lot about film, if you get what I mean. All I knew was that Tom Hanks was my favorite actor and he was on the cover and the DVD was on sale. That sounded like a surefire win to me. In the past few years I've grown out of the blind buying habit. These days my blind buys aren't blind so much as they are informed buys of directors or actors I know and trust. Road to Perdition was one of my last true blind buys, and it was a fitting way to bid adieu to that period in my life. I fell in love with Road to Perdition before I knew much about Sam Mendes. It wasn't until after I knew that I loved the film that I realized Mr. Mendes was the same man who had directed American Beauty. Now that I look back on it, I can see elements of American Beauty in Road to Perdition. That's not to say that Road to Perdition is a copy of American Beauty, because elements in this case do not equal the same movie. Mr. Mendes maintains the same slow burn in Road to Perdition that served him well in American Beauty, and he works towards the same obvious destination. In Road to Perdition, just like American Beauty, it's not a question of how the film ends but the journey the viewer takes to get to said end. The journey in Road to Perdition is not one of self-discovery or reaffirmation of the soul. The world that the characters of Road to Perdition inhabit doesn't allow for such lamentations and meditations. The characters who do spend time ruminating on their own place in the world die, the bouncer at Calvino's. Or they survive simply by virtue of their association with someone who shares the worldview of the film, Michael Jr. The times that the characters live and help to inform this gruff worldview just as much as their actions. When we see a group of men sitting at a train depot reading the paper, we know that they are not thinking about their place in the world but where their next dime and their next meal will come from. The world Sam Mendes has taken from the comic book and transplanted to the big screen is rough, but at the same time it is luscious looking. It shows the spoils of the lifestyle chosen by the Rooneys, the Rances, and the Sullivans right next to the downfalls of such a life. When Michael Sr. finally gets his wish and is traveling through the hotel to meet with Connor, I was struck by how vibrant and colorful the hallways were. The color patterns stick out just as much for their vibrancy as they do for their patterns. It would have been very easy for Mr. Mendes, Conrad Hall, the cinematographer, and Nancy Hay, the set designer, to have created a look as drab as the world. But they didn't. They created a duality of view that allows the bleakness of the characters' lives to shine just as much as the lushness of the sets. At the very heart of Road to Perdition are the performances. The film looks beautiful, and its direction is stellar. But, the film gains traction and becomes something special because of its cast. The interplay between Paul Newman and Tom Hanks is sublime. When they look at each other, the entire story and heartbreak of these two characters is seen in their eyes. The dogged admiration combined with an inability to fully comprehend the world he lives in is put forth wonderfully by the young Tyler Hoechlin. However, the film is buoyed by its smaller performances. Dylan Baker isn't given a lot of screen time as the smarmy Mr. Rance, but he makes the most of that time. Stanley Tucci spends less than 5 minutes in Mr. Mendes' picture, but in those 5 minutes his character makes an impact. There are a lot of gangster films across the landscape of the cinematic universe. There are a lot of gangster flicks that glorify the violence of the gangster existence, love the lifestyle, and present dishonorable people as honorable. Road to Perdition avoids all of those pitfalls of the gangster flick by presenting deeply flawed characters who engender sorrow in place of honor. The violence is present, but it isn't glorified, and it is often fleeting with disastrous consequences. The lifestyle is hollow, and it tears those who live it apart. Sam Mendes' film is well aware of the rest of the cinematic work about the gangster. Mr. Mendes avoids the thrill of the payoff, he expounds on the harshness of the journey, and in doing so Road to Perdition is a unique and worthwhile gangster film. Sometimes you don't really have a concrete explanation. A movie just leaves you cold. That's Road to Perdition to me. I can't really objectively point to much that's broken about it, but it just leaves me feeling frigid. Sam Mendes' second feature film, following the Oscar-winning American Beauty, is based off of a well-regarded graphic novel, and it shows. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every shot is framed like a comic book panel. Mendes directs it quite well, but it's directing on easy mode. He bought the storyboards at Barnes & Noble, fully formed, for $14.99. I'm being somewhat facetious. I'm sure it took quite a bit of savvy and skill to translate the story into a cohesive whole. Lord knows the majority of graphic novel adaptations are mediocre at best. But the compositions are so meticulous, it almost feels anti-cinematic, like a Wes Anderson movie without the spark. Tom Hanks stars as Michael Sullivan, a hitman for the mafia in 1931. One day, a hit goes bad, and his son, Michael, Jr., tweenage Tyler Hoechlin, witnesses the crime. Sullivan's relationship with his boss and adoptive father, John Rooney, Paul Newman, crumbles in the ensuing paranoia, thanks in no small part to the hot-headed second-in-command, Connor Rooney, Daniel Craig, John's son. It ends with Sullivan being chased by a creepy, psychopathic assassin photographer, Jude Law, who captures on film the bodies he's just killed. The movie makes the expected shots versus shots wordplay. The acting is all around quite good, with every member of the ensemble getting moments to shine. Newman doesn't have all that much to do, but he's completely engaged in one of his last roles. Law and Craig give perhaps the most distinctive turns as the villains of the story. And Hoechlin is no River Phoenix or Christian Bale, but he acquits himself quite well. Oddly, Hanks, almost always a slam dunk for me, feels like he's working too hard against his own instincts. Sullivan is a character who is emotionally reserved and guarded. Hanks claims to have fallen in love with the part when he read the script and fought to be cast as the lead, but it would have been better suited for someone whose presence is more intense and physically aggressive than the stereotypically congenial Hanks. He's not at all bad in the role, and has a few great moments, predictably, when Sullivan lets his guard down and opens up. But overall, it's a muted and forgettable performance of his. What really shines is the cinematography. All-timer Conrad Hall, in his last gig, really brought the magic. This is an astoundingly beautiful film, especially in the lighting. A couple of scenes, an ambush in the rain, a shootout in a hotel, actually made me emit audible noises in reaction to the loveliness. I had headphones on and my wife was confused why I was OING. Hall treats the material as a neo-noir with just the right amount of color. Everything shot in shadows at nighttime, in particular, is glorious. I'm a little bit more medium on the film's score by Thomas Newman. It's a compelling piece in isolation, but it's so overbearing throughout the film. Moments that could have built in gravity with silence are instead drowned out by climactic string refrains. The writing itself is adequately interesting. The father-son themes are dolloped on very thick, which is usually a theme I adore, but something about it didn't register here. It's all so on the nose. Plenty of moments work, but I found it all cliched and woefully unchallenging. The heart of gold hitman is such an obvious stereotype, and the film doesn't do much to push its outer boundary beyond giving him a son, and even then doesn't do much with it. Maybe I just caught Road to Perdition on the wrong day 2 times in a row, but my admiration for it outstrips my affection for it. It's a solid enough crime drama, and its 2 hours fly by pretty quickly, but without much resonance. Tom Hanks, Jude Law, Daniel Craig, Stanley Tucci and the great Paul Newman, and to this day I feel like Road to Perdition is not talked about nearly enough. It's a unique point of emphasis for multiple creative forces involved in this very early 21st century gangster epic. 2002 was an interesting time for the gangster genre itself. However, everything starts with director Sam Mendes and a dedication to craft that should never go unnoticed. Mendes is one of the best modern British filmmakers, and as varied in genre as they come. What truly started with a rare masterpiece in American Beauty turned into a career consistent with uniquely introspective and utterly entertaining films throughout the 21st century. Mendes is known for revitalizing the James Bond franchise all over again with Skyfall and exploring the depths of war in films like Jarhead in 1917. Still, Road to Perdition is his most distinct film, and unlike the rest. Part of that has to do with it being his direct follow-up to American Beauty. Mendes is not a gangster genre director, but he is something of an expert in the human condition, finding new landscapes, backdrops and environments to frame human stories in. With Road to Perdition, Mendes took on one of the better lone wolf and cub-inspired father-son tales, digging into a specific era of America and a specific cornerstone of its gritty underworld in a Prohibition-era Illinois. Of all the gangster films made in the last 25 years, it's still one of the best. There's a scene, early in Road to Perdition, at a wake, an Irish wake. We're somewhere outside Chicago, the Great Depression is in full swing, and these people are well-dressed and well-fed and, despite the gloomy occasion, happy. They're the families of mobsters, so they're doing all right. But amid the reels and jigs and kind words for the deceased, there's a rippling undercurrent of something dark, something ominous. A sneaking suspicion began to creep up on me, a thrill, almost a fear, that I was in the presence of greatness, that there was a kind of perfection in the steely paternal nobility of Paul Newman's crime boss, in Tom Hanks's calmly menacing hitman, in the certainty that they were themselves responsible for the death of the man they were now mourning, in how the entire movie to come was, I imagined, being set up in the mere glances they were trading. The thrill and the fear came partly from worrying that I might be wrong, that I might be imagining this, and boy wouldn't I feel silly later, and partly from the opposite conjecture, that I'd be right and that Road to Perdition would turn out to be one of those films that obsesses you, that insists on multiple reviewings, that won't leave you alone. I probably won't stop thinking about Road to Perdition for weeks, but I'm glad it's the latter. There's not a thing that isn't hauntingly, quietly electrifying about this, the first truly grown-up comic book movie. Fans of the medium have known for years that the form had no trouble being important, but the film industry, though perhaps not all filmmakers themselves, has stubbornly insisted on treating comic adaptations as juvenile. Comics equals superheroes equals summer popcorn flick equals throwaway junk. It's extraordinary enough that director Sam Mendes, and cinematographer Conrad L. Hall and screenwriter David Self, but mostly Mendes, has taken the graphic novel by Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner and transformed it into something awe-inspiring. It's even more extraordinary that Hollywood is treating Road to Perdition like the second coming of The Godfather. That it actually may be, is the final straw of passing strangeness. Don't tell the snoots, but Road to Perdition is pulpy to its core, in a way that recognizes the fundamental, mythic themes of pulp fiction, those of vengeance and honor and self-discovery. This story could only be set in the 1930s, when the desperation of the Depression gave rise to figures like Batman. Mendes, American Beauty, and Hull cloak much of the film in noirish darkness and rain, and their mobster characters in anonymous, almost clerical overcoats and fedoras, and as the film opens its scope and begins to take on the point of view of 12-year-old Michael Sullivan, son of Hanks as Mike Sullivan Sr., the likeness to the formative Batman story only increases. When Michael witnesses one of his father's jobs for his boss, John Rooney, Newman, where the money is, message in a bottle, it sets in motion a chain of events that results in Sullivan Sr. introducing his son, reluctantly but of necessity, to his work that is dangerous not only legally and physically but morally and spiritually. Hanks, Castaway, The Green Mile, with an unself-conscious gravitas like nothing he's shown us before, takes the paradoxical Sullivan, cold-blooded killer and loving, devoted father, and makes him a tragic hero, a man driven by dark intent while also driven to prevent his son from following his own dismal path. Screen newcomer Tyler Hoechlin, just 13 years old, makes us genuinely fear for Michael Jr.'s soul, evincing a complicated inner life for his character that few young actors can achieve and showing us in Michael real potential for slipping over to the dark side. Young Bruce Wayne witnessed his parents' murder and that pushed him over an edge from which there was no return. Will similar trauma, learning at an early age some of the dirty secrets of the world, do that to Michael? On this road to hell, the journey, not only the destination, is the point. Mendes frames the whole affair like the grimmest graphic novel ever conceived, where shadows and light and composition and even sound effects, or lack thereof, pay tribute to still images. The culmination of Sullivan Sr.'s own journey of self-discovery, for not only his son has much to learn about himself, is a street gun battle that plays out in silence, as it would on the page, the flashes of light from machine guns telling us all we need to know. In a story like this, the real bad guys are the ones who aren't morally conflicted about their bad deeds. Bruce Wayne would know what I'm talking about. Jude Law, AI artificial intelligence, enemy at the gates, is at his slimiest and most disgusting here as Maguire, a hired killer who takes souvenir photos of his victims, aka the Reporter, a comic-worthy moniker for a character who is defined by the visual, but what he sees, and as a consequence, by what he shows us, photos of the dead. Daniel Craig, Tomb Raider, Elizabeth, is Connor Rooney, son of Newman's crime boss and a putative brother to Sullivan Sr., but one with the motives of Cain. The elemental wallop that Road to Perdition delivers is like the one that keeps kids up at night, reading comic books under the covers with a flashlight, the realization that these mythic stories, of Batman or Cain and Abel or the Michael Sullivan, aren't just mythic but apply to us all. How do we keep our moral bearings in a world full of evil? I'm not sure that anyone has an answer to that. The deep-down satisfaction comes from the fact that someone is bothering to think about the question at all. It's a startling epiphany for a kid, and just as startling to be reminded of the quandary as an adult. If you want to talk about incredible cast lists, a few films spring to mind: Pulp Fiction, Glengarry Glen Ross, The Royal Tenenbaums. But Sam Mendes' 2002 film Road to Perdition can go toe-to-toe with some of the best ensemble casts in recent memory. Of course, huge cast lists do not always translate into good movies. Smokin' Aces springs to mind, so does Mendes manage to wrangle such exceptional screen talent successfully? In short, yes, his film is not just the sum of its parts. Road to Perdition follows the life of Hank's Mike Sullivan, a hitman in an Irish gang run by John Rooney, Paul Newman, in Depression-era Chicago. Sullivan's son Michael Jr., Tyler Hoechlin, sneaks along on a job, only to witness his dad and Rooney's son Connor, Craig, mowing down some rivals. Sullivan swears his son to secrecy, but Connor, fearing for himself, tries to silence Michael for good, only to mistakenly kill his younger brother and mother Annie. After this heinous wrongdoing, father and son go on the lam from Rooney's gang, fearing for their lives and seeking vengeance. The plot of Mendes' film, then, is not the most original. Gangster movies like Miller's Crossing have already worked the Irish angle, and the central thread of wronged man seeks revenge is far from uncommon in the gangster genre. Much like other gangster films, most obviously the Godfather trilogy, Road to Perdition is, at its heart, a family affair. Setting a film in late 1920s America automatically adds gravitas and cool to any story. Mendes and cinematographer Conrad L. Hall play up to this era beautifully, lovingly recreating bustling speakeasies full of floozies and fedoras, city streets bursting with vintage cars and violent episodes. This is an easy style to use, but a hard one to make your own. Hall won an Oscar for his efforts, and deservedly so. Every shot is wonderfully composed, and the scale of recreation is at times astounding. For all the familiar shots of Tommy guns and cigarette smoke, there are Hanky-esque long pans across the flat Midwest, bleached film beaches and anesthetically white murder scenes. Despite the excellence of the film's framing and composition, the beating heart of Road to Perdition really boils down to one man, and as is the case in films from Philadelphia to Castaway, that man is Tom Hanks. No one inhabits the role of the put-upon man better than Hanks, and his incredible ability to emote without overacting is really second to none. Sullivan might be a killer, but Hanks paints him as a family man first and foremost. His scenes with Michael Jr. are heartbreaking at times, and the exchanges they share don't feel staged, a very difficult effect to achieve. Remarkably, in a film in which a child is a major component, annoyance doesn't really come into it. Whining brats are the last thing we want to see on celluloid, but Tyler Hoechlin fills Michael Jr. with resilience and steel without infuriating the audience. Clearly, his comparative lack of acting chops are highlighted when he shares the screen with greats like Hanks and Newman, but making a child character likable is not an easy task, and Hoechlin, 14 at the time of filming, manages it. Newman himself is mesmeric in what many consider his last great screen performance. His John Rooney is magnificent, spouting lines like "None of us will see heaven" without a drop of pretension and retaining the roguish twinkle we'd expect from the man who played Butch Cassidy and Henry Gondorff. Newman and Craig as the fractured father and son are the real stars of this show, the latter perhaps giving his best performance to date as the unstable Connor, sporting a top Irish accent and a manic edge in his piercing blue eyes. Connor is the most ruthless character in Mendes' movie, and Craig gives the film's best performance, far from easy in a cast with this kind of talent. Jude Law's psychopathic assassin Harlan Maguire is given surprisingly little screen time, but Law cuts an interesting figure as the crime scene photographer whose fascination with death has led him to make the stories as well as document them. However, Road to Perdition does fall victim to more than a few cliches. The climactic scenes in the rain echo the finale of Mendes' celebrated American Beauty, and are beautifully shot, but feel a bit too obviously symbolic. The father-son dynamics have been handled before as well, and although brilliantly performed, it does feel as if we've seen this before on a few occasions. Additionally, the comedic scenes, whilst also smartly acted, feel a bit out of place, and the gallows humor when added to bouts of extreme violence amongst Irish gangsters will ring many bells for anyone who's seen the majestic Miller's Crossing, although there is one tree-lined location which appears to be a clear homage to the Coens film. The finale also leaves a bit to be desired, as Mendes leaves one loose end so clearly untied you see the punch coming long before you receive it. Despite these flaws, Road to Perdition is still a very enjoyable film, especially for fans of the genre. The unglamorized, brutal scenes of violence are shown to have consequences, and there is a tangibly consequential feel to every shooting. These aren't just a bunch of anonymous hoods getting whacked, but real people. Part road movie, part family drama and part all-out gangster epic, Mendes' film might not be the capo di tutti I capi, but you certainly shouldn't forget about it. Whilst it can't stand up to the titans of the gangster back catalog like Goodfellas or The Godfather, Road to Perdition is a must for all gangster film aficionados. Anchored by three superb turns by Newman, Hanks and Craig, it's a masterclass in both shot composition and acting brilliance. Although it falls prey to too many cliches and features too well-trodden a plot to be considered a classic, it's still well worth your time. Set in 1931, it follows a mob enforcer and his son as they seek vengeance against a man who murdered the rest of their family. I am not a fan of crime films, so I ultimately cherish every crime movie that I actually end up liking, and this is a gangster movie no less. But even I had to like this one as it's emotional and wonderfully made across the board. I did not care for the first half of the movie all that much. It was too dreary, simply way too slow and not particularly engaging. But the second half is where the movie became emotionally potent with the theme of father and sons, and how important it is to have a good role model being so well explored. The ending is problematic in terms of logic. Why would he keep Harlan alive? That was stupid honestly, but it was still absolutely heartbreaking and beautiful. That last line almost made me cry. The movie features a terrific ensemble cast. Tom Hanks is an odd choice to play a mob man, but because he has a good heart beneath, it suited him. He's great throughout, and the father-son relationship drives this film as it's so moving. I also found Paul Newman terrific in this superb late role for him. The scenes between him and Sullivan were also all wonderful. Daniel Craig in a pre-Bond role is pretty good, though his character is a bit one-note. I preferred Jude Law. He was so well cast as this imposing villain. Never has he been this dangerous. Road to Perdition has Rain as a symbol of impending death. I liked its cinematography a lot, but it was definitely overly accentuated to the point of becoming excessive. The whole film tries to imitate noirish atmosphere, but only to a certain degree of success. But I appreciated Sam Mendes' reliably strong direction, a great choice of sparingly used dialogue and strong themes. I just wish it had fewer plot holes and that the first half was more interesting. When Michael Sullivan Jr. witnesses a murder, he ends up on the road with his mob father Michael Sullivan. This was never going to be easy and they are pushed to the limits. Road to Perdition is a truly powerful film set in 1931 during the Great Depression and focuses on Michael Sullivan, who is an enforcer in the Irish mob for boss John Rooney, the man who raised him due to being an orphan. John's love for Michael is greater than that of his biological son Connor, and this certainly causes so many issues. This will then force the series of events that lead to Michael and his son having to leave their home. Battling to stay alive, Michael Jr. is about to witness many sides to his father that he has no idea actually exists. Connors jealously will see him fight for his father's attention and love in the wrong way. This results in him killing Michael's wife and youngest son. He then goes into hiding, and as Michael battles to survive attending meetings with other men in an attempt to still make money. Harlan Maguire, a crime scene photographer and assassin, is sent after Sullivan, and this creates a bit of chase involved in the story. It certainly makes for some rather impressive scenes, and wondering if he will manage to catch them. The scenes between Sullivan and John Rooney really are impressive, and we would not really expect anything less from Tom Hanks and Paul Newman sharing the screen, would we? This leads very nicely into the performances, and obviously Tom Hanks leads the film in a fantastic manner, and that allows Tyler Hoechlin to also put in an amazing performance for someone so young. Then we add in Paul Newman, the legend that is very much a scene stealer, and it is very easy to see how and why he was nominated in a supporting role for this film, which as it turns out was his only supporting nomination. His other 7 were as a leading actor. I guess it was therefore fitting when this was his last live-action performance. Daniel Craig is Connor, and this allows him to be the spoilt child of Rooney, and he is given some very interesting and good scenes. Jude Law is decent, as well as Harlan Maguire in the chase. I also feel that I need to mention Stanley Tucci as well. Even though his role is very small, I still thought he was very good. The film is based on a graphic novel, which I am assuming many people won't really notice, as I would never have really thought that. I tend to link them with Sin City and films that are done in that manner. Something that was extremely impressive was the score. It fits in magically within the film and creates that extra edge. It is not a massively dialogue-heavy film, but I feel that makes it even more powerful, as some of the lines then blow you away. The biggest one for me is from Paul Newman with "There are only murderers in this room. Michael, open your eyes. This is the life we chose, the life we lead. And there is only one guarantee: none of us will see heaven." Michael Jr., Hoechlin, doesn't know much about what his father, Hanks, does. All he does know is that their family owes a great deal to an older gentleman named John Rooney, Newman, who's his dad's boss. Sometimes Dad goes out to take care of business for Mr. Rooney, and Mom, Lee, isn't going to talk either. Finally, curiosity, you know what that leads to, gets the better of him, and he learns more about his father's occupation than he could ever possibly want to, and puts his entire family in harm's way in the process. Welcome to Sam Mendes' sophomore helming effort, the first being American Beauty, the best film of 1999. I approached this film with some trepidation, as other sophomore outings of recent star directors have not exactly been up to snuff. Nolan, anyone? I shouldn't have worried. Hanks, wanting to play something a little darker, and having stated in an interview he would have loved the spacey role in Beauty, is a master of underplaying his hand as a professional killer. Watch him in scenes where he's not, on the surface, doing anything. He has the part nailed, and, as always with Hanks, it's easy to think that he's not working at all. It just looks so effortless. Speaking of effort, though, the two things that amaze me about this film are its duplicitous nature and its look. By its nature, I'm talking about how it has all the trappings of a gangster movie, and was even billed as a gangster movie. Granted, a gorgeous gangster movie, but still. Instead, it's an incredibly intricate film about the relationship between fathers and sons, of all types. It's also the best-looking film of the year, Two Towers included. This is due to the masterwork of Conrad Hall, who we unfortunately lost this year, and even more unfortunately will win the Oscar because he's dead and not because this film is the latest in a career that gets better with each outing. There are moments of such silence on the screen that you're forced to simply watch the actors acting without words, watch the landscapes. There's plenty to see and experience. It's just a damn shame this marks the last time we'll see Hall's work on screen. As said, Hanks is Hanks, and he's an incredible figure on screen. Matching him, though, is Paul Newman. I fear this film's only nomination besides Hall, as the father/crime boss who has to make a choice between a biological son and an adopted one. The pain and inevitability of his actions are powerful, and the performance is wonderfully nuanced. Jude Law is demonically creepy and should not be missed. Days after watching the film, my skin was still trying to find a way to crawl off my body. And Hoechlin, although he isn't given much to do amidst these giants, is fulfilling his purpose, and doing so admirably. The best picture of the year thus far. It's a shame that it will probably get lost in the Chicago/hours upswell here at the end. Now that it's close to being available on DVD, it's highly recommended that you check it out. Big screen would have been preferable, but for a film this good, do the best you can. I am a big fan of mobster-related stories, whether it's from a movie, TV show, book, or even video games. I don't know why they fascinate me so much, I guess they just kind of do. So then I heard about a mob movie starring one of my favorite actors, Tom Hanks. So of course it got my attention pretty quickly, even though it took me a lot of time before I watched it. But now I have finally gotten the chance to watch it, and it's time to talk about it. This movie follows the young boy Michael Sullivan Jr., Tyler Hoechlin, as he one night watches what his father, Tom Hanks, does for a living, killing people. So after that his mother and younger brother get killed by Connor Rooney, Daniel Craig, who was working with Sullivan Sr. that night. So of course our hero must run away with his son to keep him safe. He is also going around hunting down who are part of the death of his family. I know my explanation of the plot is pretty vague, but it is difficult talking about this plot without giving you every detail ever. I can at least say that I loved both the premise of the plot and the execution. The movie really explores the relationship between father and son here and how they bond, in a strange way. The story not only brought up some interesting things but was also pretty powerful. So I can safely say that I thoroughly enjoyed the story in this movie. The characters were really well written. They didn't only have great dialogue but also felt very realistic in what came out of their mouths. And the performances in the movie were pretty fucking great if you ask, well, anyone. Tom Hanks is always good, but I feel like this might be one of his best performances in my opinion. Paul Newman was also pretty great in this movie. It was also nice to see Daniel Craig in a great performance that wasn't James Bond. Jude Law was also really good. Overall, every actor did a great job in this movie, but there was one performance that really surprised me with how good it was, and that was young Tyler Hoechlin, who was only 15 at the time. He honestly gave one of the best child performances I have ever seen. Great job, Tyler. The score by Thomas Newman is nothing short of great. It really works to create the dark, tense atmosphere of the movie. Yes, there were a few more light-hearted parts in both the movie and the score that loosened the tension a little bit, but I think that worked pretty damn well. There were a few tracks that I believe weren't composed by Thomas Newman but were licensed tracks, but they worked too. Every piece of music in this movie really helped capture the time period of the 1930s, which is the time period the movie is set in. So the music was overall great. This movie is beautifully directed. It is rare to find a movie that looks this great these days. It uses a bunch of longer takes in some scenes, which I really appreciate since a lot of modern movies uses cuts every goddamn second. I also appreciate how they didn't use shaky cam during the more action-wise scenes and actually let us see the goddamn things on the screen, compared to all modern movies. Here is a fun fact about the movie. It is based on a graphic novel by Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner. And to answer your possible question, no, I have not read the graphic novel, but I kinda wish to. The most reliable person in Hollywood is Tom Hanks, and he does it once again in Road to Perdition, a gangster action drama based in the 1930s. Director Sam Mendes' last film was a little-known piece called American Beauty, and let's just say that the critical and box office success of that one was enough to convince such actors as Hanks, Paul Newman, Jude Law and Stanley Tucci to join his next project. The expectations were high for the follow-up to one of the best pictures of the last 10 years, and thankfully, those expectations were fulfilled. Tom Hanks stars as Michael O'Sullivan, a hitman who is forced to go on the run with his elder son after he witnesses a murder. His wife and younger son murdered, O'Sullivan runs and hunts at the same time, searching for the man that murdered half of his family. Hanks, like usual, turns in a stunning performance. He is quiet and brooding, dark yet fatherly, and at times heartless, and Michael O'Sullivan marks yet another ambitious project for this actor who cannot fail. Hanks does a terrific job, but the type of role probably won't give him another Oscar nomination. The movie itself really isn't Oscar caliber either, but only because of the story. Based on a graphic novel, Road to Perdition is basically a tale of vengeance with a dramatic edge. It is dramatic and well told, with a great script and terrific direction, but not necessarily the type of story that generally warrants Oscar nominations. Still, the very fact that I am talking about Oscar worthiness says something about the quality of the film. It is wonderful. There are a few very short, slow parts, but for the most part Road to Perdition flows well. The dramatic scenes are well done and believable, the action scenes are realistic and suspenseful, and there are many comical moments as well. Tom Hanks is superb, but the rest of the cast is good as well. Paul Newman turns in his best performance in years. Tyler Hoechlin, the young man that plays Hanks' son, is exceptionally talented. The man that really steals the show is Jude Law, a rather good-looking man who here is turned into an ugly, dark, and creepy figure that will be remembered as one of the best movie villains of the last several years. Road to Perdition lived up to my expectations, even though they were high. It's not quite American Beauty, but it's close. 14 years ago, Tom Hanks played the lead in Big, about a little boy secretly trapped in a grown-up's body. His latest movie could be a companion piece, if you renamed it Bad. Because Hanks, that imperishably decent leading man, the Jimmy Stewart of our day, is improbably trapped inside a villainous role. At least I think it's supposed to be villainous. Consider the facts. This 1930s America gangster drama based on Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner's graphic novel has Hanks maintaining his pleasant, ordinary Joe aura, but playing Mike Sullivan, a mobster and hitman who thinks nothing of rubbing people out every working day. When his own wife and child are murdered in a gangland dispute, he sets out matter-of-factly to gun down the perpetrator with his remaining boy in tow, after showing no more emotion than one strangled, off-camera yelp. He never cries. He appears basically unrepentant about his own career and seems never fully to realize, still less acknowledge, that in choosing the gangster's vicious, violent life he is ultimately responsible for his wife and child's death. A chilling study in the moral obtuseness of the criminal? Or is it the movie itself that's obtuse? I suspect it's the latter, and that at some level, the casting of Hanks hardwires naivety and sentimentality into this picture. But set against that is the unarguably beautiful look of the film, conjured up by veteran cinematographer Conrad L. Hall, with wonderful images and tableaus. And most importantly, there are the stunningly ambitious, intriguingly experimental compositions devised by the director Sam Mendes, who imposes a steely, rigorous visual intelligence on every frame. It is a period setting that has not been fashionable in Hollywood for 30 years. This heavily furnished, tightly buttoned film has all the familiar Tommy guns, antique automobiles, snap brim hats and heavy suits, but it's very unusual. The swirling choreography of black-clad figures, often under umbrellas in heavy rain, makes Mendes's movie look like a kind of expressionist ballet, in which the smell of fear and sweat and gun smoke is weirdly absent. In fact, the final, tumultuous shootout occurs in silence, over Thomas Newman's dreamy score, the only sign of a blazing machine gun being a distant flickering in the dark. Repeatedly, it reminded me of a very accomplished stage production. Try to imagine a 1930s gangland interpretation of Shakespeare, only not of Shakespeare, but actually of 1930s gangland itself, and you'll have some idea of the startlingly stylized world that Mendes has imagined. The actors don't have much room to breathe in it, certainly less than Mendes gave Kevin Spacey and Annette Bening for their bravura turns in American Beauty. Jennifer Jason Leigh has the brief and thankless role of Mike Sullivan's housefrau. I can't see her without thinking of Bruce Wagner's Hollywood novel I'm Losing You, in which a jaded producer objects to casting Lee, because when audiences see her they start the mental countdown to the rape. Well, no rape, but it's a pretty short countdown to her brutal dispatch. From then on, there's no love interest, it's dar testosterone all the way. Jude Law plays the smirkingly creepy hitman compress photographer McGuire, who sells gruesome pictures of the dead, a figure partly based on the real-life snapper Ouija. Daniel Craig is excellent as the cowardly, idle Connor Rooney. He is the undeserving son of John Rooney, the patriarch of the Irish Catholic mob and ruler of the Roost, a terrific glowering performance from Paul Newman, who proves that he is a class act without peer. The scene in which he suddenly thumps the boardroom table in a rage, infuriated by Connor's insolent attitude, had us all jumping in our seats. Which brings us to the central puzzle, Tom Hanks. He has just taken his normal performance, subtracted a bit of the comedy and the warmth, and put nothing in its place. His response to his wife's death in Sleepless in Seattle was more convincing. There is no reason someone in his situation shouldn't go into shock, but it just looks like Hanks can't raise his game, or is given no opportunity to raise it, in a script that calls for him to be the trite and highly inappropriate embodiment of Hollywood family values. It doesn't matter that he is a killer, apparently the point is that he is a dad, and he loves his boy. Perdition means hell, and Catholicism is avowedly an important part of the story. One of the sharpest moments comes when Mike tells his son that in an emergency he should contact the local Methodist minister, and not the priest up to his neck, it's implied, in gangland connections. But when, in the final reel, Rooney tells Mike, "None of us will see heaven," you know no one in this lenient movie really believes that. Lovable Hanks and Newman, roasting in everlasting torment? Police. When this was screened at the Venice Film Festival last month, there were some jeers and catcalls. Some in the audience found it sentimental, particularly the sugary final line, "A small rump, it is rumored," disdained these Irish hoodlums and thought the Italian mafia the best in the world. But the main charge was glamorizing organized crime. I don't think it does, any more than any other film on the subject, except Abel Ferrara's The Funeral, in which the idea of gangsters going to hell is taken very seriously indeed. Road to Perdition is probably too detached, too self-consciously artifactual to glamorize anything very much. But in lots of ways that matter, this has been another terrifically confident achievement from Sam Mendes. The challenge will be to move on to simpler, less grandiloquent material on a more plausibly human scale. One of the most underrated movies of the 2000s was Sam Mendes' Road to Perdition, which was released to critical acclaim back in 2002 and did pretty well at the box office with around $200 million in ticket sales. While some people would be skeptical of watching Road to Perdition at first because they think it's your average crime/mafia movie that doesn't have much to offer in terms of storyline and symbolism, they would be wrong when it comes to this film. Sam Mendes, who directed two other great films, American Beauty and Revolutionary Road, does an excellent job here as this movie is beautifully shot and has a stellar cast. Road to Perdition also benefited from the legendary cinematography work of the departed Conrad L. Hall, for which he won a posthumous Oscar for Best Cinematography for this film after he passed away in 2003. The scenery and settings for this movie helped to create quite a unique atmosphere, and the wide shots, long angles that are used helped to make this film stand out as being above average. Beyond just the cinematography, the acting by the cast also stands out. When you look back to see who was starring in the main roles for Road to Perdition, it is a very impressive list. Tom Hanks plays Michael Sullivan Sr., the lead role of the film, and a conflicted Irish mafia man caught between his past and keeping his son sheltered from the consequences of his actions. Paul Newman, one of the greatest American actors of all time, plays the role of John Rooney, an Irish mafia boss, who is also conflicted between his paternal feelings of love for Michael Sr. and his wish to protect his own son, Connor, played by a young Daniel Craig, from his own destructive sins. Rounding out the list is Jude Law, who plays a gifted hitman/grizzly photographer known as Harlan McGuire, and Stanley Tucci, who plays a high-ranking member of the Italian mafia known as Frank Nitti. A young actor who steals most of his scenes is the young but talented Tyler Hoechlin, who is Michael Sullivan Jr. in the film, a boy who is coming to terms with his father's lifestyle and his ties to the mafia. A truly impressive cast of Academy Award winners and nominees, which makes this film even more of a lasting treasure. Road to Perdition really brings the atmosphere and makes the setting feel real as it portrays life in Great Depression-era America by focusing on specifically both on the city of Chicago and its rural hinterlands, cornfields of Greater Illinois. The movie really portrays well the last decade of America being discovered and settled, while undergoing deep economic difficulties, as the Irish and Italian mafias become a source of income and employment when none could be had. Most movies don't seem to want to portray the mafia as having been a well-oiled machine that acted like a legitimate business, but Road to Perdition makes clear that there are ways to look at the criminal enterprises that achieved a lot of prominence during the Great Depression due to their ability to bootleg and their appeal to provide a good income to men without work. Without spoiling too much of the plot, Michael Sullivan Jr., Tom Hanks, is an enforcer and bodyguard for the Irish Mafia in the Chicago area of Illinois who has a close relationship with his boss, John Rooney, Paul Newman, who is implied to have helped Michael Sr. a lot with a home, a steady income, and a purpose which is quite difficult to come by during the height of the Great Depression. Michael Sr. is a flawed man who has done murder and committed other crimes for his boss, Mr. Rooney, and knows that it may cost him his life. Despite his past transgressions, he wants to protect his family from his sins and wants to keep his boys from knowing about what he does for a living. Connor Rooney, Daniel Craig, is shown to be jealous of the close relationship that his father, John, and Michael Sr. have and is resentful of him. Michael Sullivan Jr., Tyler Hoechlin, is distant from Michael Sr., his father due to late working hours and distant lifestyle. As any boy would like to know about his father, Michael Jr. decides to find out the truth about who his father, Michael Sr. is, and what he does for Mr. Rooney. At this point, the plot really takes off in tragic and unexpected ways, leaving the viewer engaged in the storyline and the eventual outcome. As mentioned before, the acting done by this legendary cast helps make the film what it is and what it still is today. Beyond just being a typical mobster movie, Road to Perdition has a number of poignant and thought-provoking themes that stay with you even after the end credits begin to roll. This film goes over the trials and tribulations that fathers and sons can have with each other even when they love and care for each other dearly. Michael Sr. and John Rooney are not related by blood but have a relationship similar to a father and son, as Mr. Rooney was around for Michael and his family when they had nothing. He is heavily indebted to Mr. Rooney even if he knows what he is doing is wrong by committing violent acts for the mafia. Still, their bond appears to be unbreakable and they get along quite well with each other. To the contrary, both of their relationships with their respective sons are shaky at best and hostile at worst. There is a considerable distance between Michael Sr. and Michael Jr. due to the fact that Michael Sr. makes his lifestyle and his work for Mr. Rooney a well-kept secret. Michael Sr. does not show much affection or love for his boy, and it's not made clear until the end of the film why that is. Michael Sr. obviously cares for his boy but likely doesn't want his son to know about the horrible things he's done to keep him, his brother, and his wife safe from harm or want. Still though, Michael Jr. does not want to be kept away from his father and who he is. He ends up pursuing the truth whether or not his father wants him to or not, leading to quite a turn of events when the truth comes to light. Connor Rooney, John's son, is quite envious of the close relationship that Michael Sr. has with his father compared to him. However, this is for a number of reasons. Connor is very much unlike his father, John, and has a number of character and personality flaws that make him a liability to the family. Connor is shown to be impulsive, manipulative, untrustworthy, and greedy, but the conflict comes to light when John Rooney must decide if he should stick by his son's side or give him up due to his past misdeeds. As John Rooney says to Michael Sullivan Sr. during one of the movie's best scenes, sons were put on this earth to trouble their fathers. During one of the movie's most touching scenes, Michael Sr. tells Michael Jr. about an idyllic town called Perdition, Illinois, which has beautiful scenery along the beach of Lake Michigan, and where the Sullivan family has visited before when Michael Jr. was a little boy. Perdition is portrayed as a goal for the two Michaels to get to in order to start their lives anew and escape the sins of the past. It's a way for Michael Sr. to get redemption after taking care of his ties to the mafia and by trying to make up for what he did wrong as both a father and a man. The word perdition, as defined in other words, is hell or complete and utter damnation in more religious terms. Michael Sr. may try to redeem his sins by going to church or by rectifying the wrongs he's done by getting revenge on the men who wronged him in the past, but he knows deep down that it may not be enough. If he is on the road to perdition or the road to hell, the film shows the audience that he wants to keep his son, Michael Jr., from going down that same path. He wants badly for his son to have a better life and a brighter future away from violence and death. Michael Sr. won't let his downfall lead to that of his sons as well. Even if Michael Sr. is a murderer and a sinner, he knows what's still right from wrong, and he is going to do his best to preserve the innocence and goodness of his son. As a father, he is flawed, but he still loves his son dearly and wants the best for him still. Certain moves fit a certain season of the year well, and Road to Perdition is no exception. The winter setting, the Chicago cold, and the mature themes help lead it to being an ideal film to be watched during the depths of winter in January and February. Without spoiling anything, the film is a real story with real characters who are flawed in their own ways but who each have their own complex motives that drive the plot forward. This film, most of all, touches the audience emotionally and will pull on your heartstrings. Road to Perdition is a very underrated film that remains one of my favorite movies to this day. I highly recommend Road to Perdition to other movie buffs who are looking to watch a crime/mafia film that has a soul. In addition to having an all-star cast, a renowned director, and a legendary cinematographer at the helm, Road to Perdition's music score composed by Thomas Newman is excellent and fits perfectly into the many moods of the film and has some stirring moments that add to the film's setting. If you're snowed in this weekend from the blizzard, do yourself a favor and go watch Road to Perdition. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, in the middle of all the summer blockbusters, a gem is released. Road to Perdition is a dark and incredible work of art. From start to finish, this film is meticulously constructed in a way that is truly amazing to watch. Perdition is the story of a hitman, Michael Sullivan, who is also a family man. When his family and job collide, leaving his wife and one of his sons dead, he takes his other son on the road in an attempt to avenge their death. The only problem is that the man who killed them is also the son of the boss, so naturally there are many people out to get Sullivan. One man in particular is hired to kill Sullivan. His name is Maguire and he is slightly insane, a performance by Jude Law that you would not expect to see. Sam Mendes directs this film in the same incredible way that grabbed us with American Beauty. And of course it does not hurt that Conrad Hall Sr. came along to do this film as well, for as breathtaking as the performances are, the way this film was shot. Cinematography does not get any better than this film. Tom Hanks is great in the subtle role of Sullivan. He finds a way to stay a hardened killer the whole film and still let us know what he is feeling with his eyes. Paul Newman is the boss and he still proves himself to be one of the most talented actors still working. Although this may possibly be the best film in years, don't rush out to see it unless you are sure that you can handle it. Perdition is filled with violence and men who know that they are on their way to hell. Many people are shot very brutally and the violence can be tough to watch. There is also a lot of language. Bottom line is that this is not a film for the immature. If you truly do appreciate film as a work of art and not just entertainment, then chances are you will love this film. Otherwise, it might be safer to just see the blockbusters instead. Over the years, there have been so many films centering on parent-child relationships that it seemed as if the well had finally run dry on the genre. After all, how many cinematic variations can there be on the topic without becoming a cliched, been there done that affair? Based on the graphic novel by Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner, Road to Perdition is one of the most genuinely felt and honest portrayals of a father-son relationship put on film, and goes to prove that, at the very least, the final word on the subject has yet to be spoken. For every father and son, or every mother and daughter, etc., there is in the world, there is a highly personal and, yet, widely relatable story to be told. Family relations is not a new motif for director Sam Mendes, whose debut feature, American Beauty, was the best film of 1999 and the Academy Award winner for Best Picture. The scope in which Road to Perdition is made in is smaller and more intimate, but, in its own way, hits just as unshakably close to home. Set in Chicago, circa 1931, 12-year-old Michael Sullivan Jr., Tyler Hoechlin, lives a seemingly Norman Rockwell existence with his happy family, father Michael, Tom Hanks, mother, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and younger brother Peter, Liam Aiken. Intrigued by the apocryphal work his father does for his powerful, highly regarded boss, John Rooney, Paul Newman, Michael Jr. decides to secretly follow him one night on a business call. He is thoroughly disturbed and horrified when he witnesses the cold-blooded murder of a man. When he is caught spying on them, Sullivan assures Rooney and his own son, Connor, Daniel Craig, that Michael Jr. will not expose their profession. For hired hitmen whose very lives are on the line, Sullivan's word simply is not good enough. The unpredictable and occasionally shocking plot developments that follow, which have thankfully not been telegraphed in the trailers and television ads, is best left to be discovered on your own. What can be said is a tragedy occurs that shatters the lives of the entire family, leading Sullivan, a man who recognizes the sins he has committed in his life and accepts them, to fear for Michael's fate, both in this world and the next. Aside from the sparklingly conceived father-son bond that finds its way to the core of the story, Road to Perdition is a lurid, downbeat, meticulously executed revenge tale, and a triumph for the eyes, courtesy of Conrad L. Hall's American Beauty, sumptuous, beautifully haunting cinematography, and Dennis Gassner's authentically represented production design. A bead of sweat nervously trickling down a character's temple, a heavy rainstorm amid a snowy landscape, and an almost poetic, slow-motion sequence of gunfire and murder are just a sampling of the unforgettable images Hall and Mendes have cooked up in presenting a story where the use of visuals is every bit as important as dialogue in digging to the roots of the characters. A rare motion picture with both a gorgeously rendered style and a multi-layered, heartfelt character study, Road to Perdition is noir filmmaking at its peak. Surely one of his darkest, most uncompromising roles to date, Tom Hanks, 2000's Castaway, can add yet another remarkably effective performance to his much-lauded resume. Hanks' work is subtle and his character underplayed, but the power he holds cannot be denied, as a man whose decisions are finally causing his life, and that of his family, to implode. Newcomer Tyler Hoechlin, as Michael Sullivan Jr., delivers the kind of assured, yet unaffected acting that, hopefully, will not be lost as he grows older and garners more experience in performing. As John Rooney, whose relationship with his own son is strained and whose life is also at a moralistic and fatalistic crossroad, Paul Newman, 1999's Message in a Bottle, hasn't had this weighty of a role in years. His every moment on screen confirms what a bold and emphatic talent he still is. In a smaller, but no less extraordinary, turn, Jude Law, 2001's AI, Artificial Intelligence, plays McGuire, also known as the Reporter, an unrelenting undercover assassin who likes to photograph his handiwork after the fact. The extreme violence and unflinching blood present in Road to Perdition makes a startling impact and, no doubt, tests the boundaries of the R rating, but it is wholeheartedly necessary. The majority of the characters within the story are killers, and director Mendes does not shy away from viewing his heavy subject matter head-on. Credit screenwriter David Self, 1999's The Haunting, also, in recognizing that at the heart of every great tale is something everyone should be able to relate to. The urgency Sullivan feels in warding his son, whom he loves more than anything in the world, away from a life of harsh cruelty and endless crime is done with a thoughtfully poignant hand that avoids easy sentiment. The concluding scenes of Road to Perdition are its trickiest, both technically and subjectively, and Mendes pulls them off with the assuredness of a veteran who has been making movies for decades, rather than that of a novice only on his sophomore directing effort. With the final line of dialogue, delivered ever so eloquently by Michael Jr. about how he responds when asked if his father was a good man, Mendes sums up a universal notion that is as stirringly true as any statement that could have possibly been concocted on the subject. As with the lingering effect of American Beauty, Road to Perdition has an underlyingly hopeful current running throughout, but at its soul is one of an impossible heartbreak that can never be fully mended. A beautifully crafted and well-acted period piece, Road to Perdition isn't a film without some concerns, but clearly, it shows that director Sam Mendes certainly has not run into a case of sophomore slump after his debut with American Beauty. Based on the graphic novel by Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner and adapted by David Self, 13 Days, Mendes' film benefits from extraordinary cinematography by Conrad Hall, impressive production design by Dennis Gassner, phenomenal costumes and other technical marvels. This is clearly a film where every sequence was set up and composed with the utmost care. The film takes place in 1931. Michael Sullivan, Tom Hanks, is the hitman that boss John Rooney, Paul Newman, calls upon first, and the two almost have a father-slash-son relationship. One night, Sullivan's son Michael, Tyler Hoechlin, sneaks in his father's car as he goes on another job, as the child is curious about his father's mysterious work. Michael witnesses his father and others kill men when a job that was just supposed to be about having a talk goes wrong. Rooney's son Connor, jealous of the way that Rooney sees Sullivan as a son and angered by what his other son witnessed, comes after Sullivan's family. After Sullivan escapes a potential threat, he comes home to find that his son is the only one remaining. The two flee to Chicago, seeking assistance from Capone associate Frank Nitti, Stanley Tucci, but find none. While Sullivan and Son hit the road to steal the mob's money to gain power, another hitman, Jude Law, has been sent after them. Eventually, he realizes that seeking revenge against Connor is something he can only do himself. A great deal of discussion revolved around Hank's decision to take on a darker character than he usually portrays. While I'm still unsure that Hanks was the right choice for the role, he clearly does a fine job defining the character's light and dark sides. The performance is a little more underplayed at times than I'd have liked, but it's still another fine effort from the actor. Newman's fairly brief performance is a little more powerful, and certainly, it's a credit to Newman's masterful skills as an actor that he can clearly define this character so wonderfully in such a brief period. Law is enjoyable and a creepier character than he's ever found himself playing, although the character isn't developed much. Stanley Tucci is also fantastic in a small role. The concerns that troubled me with Perdition in the theater don't seem as much of an issue the second time around. Although the film remains relentlessly gloomy, I can see what Mendes was going for, but having the film less subdued would have helped move the film forward and certainly would have increased the tension. The film's pace seemed to be less slow and the film less padded. I still feel a few minutes here and there, maybe 10 to 15 in all, could still have been deleted. While I still wouldn't consider it along with the classics of the genre, I do find a great deal to appreciate with Road to Perdition. The film is technically remarkable and the performances, especially Newman, are solid. Even though I'm still unsure Hanks was the exact right choice for Sullivan, he still makes it work. I still find aspects of it problematic, but Perdition is certainly a strong follow-up to American Beauty. Road to Perdition is presented on this release in both Dolby Digital 5.1 and DTS 5.1. Given the fact that a separate Dolby Digital release exists, it seems odd that both would be included on this DTS featured release. The only difference between the two releases is that the HBO making of doesn't return this time around. A 2-disc set with the first disc entirely devoted to the film, with DTS and DD soundtracks, and the second disc for supplements probably would have been a neater option and allowed the entire first disc to be devoted to the film's audio-video. This is never a particularly aggressive soundtrack, but there are moments of skillful sound design. The film is nominated for an Oscar for both sound and sound editing, although one would probably be correct to guess Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers will walk away with both those awards, that are appropriate and enjoyable. Thomas Newman's score, while used to underline a scene or two too many, is a pleasure to listen to and sounds marvelous here. Presented broadly across the front soundstage and richly reinforced by the rears, the score comes through with remarkable clarity and warmth. As for the surrounds, they also do a fine job adding ambience, some subtle and some more apparent. Although largely a subtle film, sound effects in the action scenes were certainly loud. Dialogue remained clear and crisp throughout. As for comparisons between the Dolby and DTS soundtracks, there were some noticeable, if not major, differences. This soundtrack is all about the small details, and personally, I thought the DTS track brought out the more aspects of the sound, light ambience, etc., with stronger clarity and detail. Thomas Newman's score also benefits from the DTS presentation, sounding a bit more open and warm in comparison to the Dolby counterpart. Sound effects in the louder sequences were certainly fierce on the Dolby track, but they seemed tighter and a bit more powerful on the DTS release. Although the DTS audio offered a somewhat improved listening experience, I thought the Dolby Digital presentation was crisp and dynamic, too. Thankfully, the description for the visually impaired audio track also returns for this release. It must be hard being Tom Hanks sometimes. If he does a comedy like You've Got Mail, everyone talks about how great he can be at comedies and want him to be goofy more often. If he makes a drama, this two-time Oscar winner gets hit with question after question about what he thinks his chances are to win another Oscar. All of the Academy Award buzz can distract filmgoers from actually enjoying the experience of watching the film. The new Sam Mendes film Road to Perdition is one of those dramas that already has people talking about little golden trophies. Based on a graphic novel written by Max Allan Collins and illustrated by Richard Piers Rayner, Road to Perdition follows Michael Sullivan, a hitman for the Irish mob, as he and his son set out on a journey fueled by revenge. The film studies the relationships of fathers and sons, both real and honorary. Sullivan, Tom Hanks, works for local mob boss John Rooney, Paul Newman, a man who controls his town with a mixture of charm and violence and is like a father to Sullivan. This fact does not sit well with Rooney's own son Connor, Daniel Craig, a loose cannon who shares his father's violence but not his brains or charm. When Sullivan's son Michael Jr., Tyler Hoechlin, witnesses his stoic father and Connor carrying out a hit, Sullivan's wife, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and youngest son are killed. Sullivan suddenly finds himself outside of the crime family he knew and trusted and traveling with a son he barely knows. Fathers and sons, love and hate, trust and loyalty, all of those relationships are tested and explored. The first thing that strikes you about Road to Perdition is the look of the film. It captures the dark, shadowy look of a graphic novel. The sadness of the characters and story is reflected in the lighting and the weather. Rain, snow, and slush are the stars here. If the sun makes an appearance, it's an unbilled cameo. This is the Depression era, and the clothes on Sullivan hang off his body like they empathize with the pain and suffering he has seen and caused. Being a tragedy, you have a pretty good idea where most of the characters are headed. In that case, you need good actors who will make the ride interesting as you head down a road you know. The buzz before this movie is that Tom Hanks was playing a character against his likable everyman persona. Hanks' Michael Sullivan does have some characteristics we recognize, like love of family, trust and loyalty, but this is a man that most of us luckily don't know. Sullivan always tried to do the right thing by Rooney, but in his profession the right thing often involved taking someone's life. Hanks wears the role like a heavy coat. His eyes betray the weary sadness of a man who has seen, and caused, many deaths. There are a couple of brief sparks of humor from this character, but they are just a couple of patches of sunlight in an overcast sky. Paul Newman's John Rooney perfectly captures the duality of the mob boss's character. A charitable man who can also order a killing. A man involved in gambling, numbers, booze and prostitution who doesn't want to get involved in the unions because what men do after work is what made us rich. No need to screw them at work. His performance is both sinister and charming. Newcomer Tyler Hoechlin comes into a film with heavyweights like Newman and Hanks and rising star Jude Law, and he doesn't blink. His performance is solid and his character's the one that audiences will most likely identify with. Jude Law's role as a hitman that makes extra income by selling photos of his victims is another page in a book of great performances by this rising star. His role is small, but in the few scenes that he's on screen we see the rat-like independence of this killer who operates outside the trappings of the organized crime families. If you've got the money, he's got the gun, as long as he can keep the photo rights. Jennifer Jason Leigh and Stanley Tucci also have small roles in the film, but again, there are no small roles, just small actors. If you give a one-line role to a great actor, they'll add to the richness of the film. Sam Mendes and his team have created a film that is almost overpowering in its reach to be viewed as an important film. Their attention to detail, cinematography, costumes and score all seem to aim for multiple accolades for everyone involved. In an industry where success is often measured with breasts and fast food tie-ins, what's wrong with a little ambition? The whole observation of the development of actions prescribed in the movie goes along with a good adaptation of the screenplay by David Self. With the use of solely American themes of the Great Depression and overall social and economic pressure on Americans, the film is screened in genuinely dark and gray colors. It was done by the director in order to deliver the drama of the main character. In fact, the genre peculiarity of the movie runs across the symbiosis of several different trends in movies, such as crime, adventure, drama, and thriller. However, it is better to focus on the drama genre of the movie. The tense plot of the movie incorporates features of bloodshed, shooting, and many other defiant scenes so as to describe the way the violence is shown in terms of genre uniqueness. As a matter of fact, the film describes the typical story where the themes of revenge, death, cruelty, and ignorance of human values are all over. The protagonist Michael Sullivan Sr., Tom Hanks, becomes a victim of misunderstanding, or better to say mistrust, on the part of Connor Rooney. As a result, the innocent death of Sullivan's wife and son gives him no choice but to seek vengeance. As the film stars many of the great actors, a special uniqueness is in the fact that Tom Hanks is recognized here to play the first cruel role of a bad guy. He's an anti-hero to a degree, and as the story unfolds he does become a cold and calculating killer bent on revenge. Weiner 117. To say more, the peculiarity of genre coherence in what Mendes put through personal vision is in the seriousness of Tom Hanks's role. In contrast to other criminal movies, such as The Godfather and Public Enemies, this film is accomplished by scenes rich in violence. Sam Mendes did really emphasize the influence on the viewers by representing Tom Hanks in an uncharacteristically dark role, Fairbanks 301. This maneuver contrasted the framework of the expected effects by a spontaneous emergence of what was not expected at all. The film adheres to the cruelty of the genre. However merciful are the offenders, Michael Sullivan wipes up with everyone more or less related to his tragedy. Here a viewer can acquire different treatment of the protagonist's action: positive, for the murderer should be punished anyway; negative, as this is amoral and too cruel to be done by solely one person, especially done by so gentle and inoffensive actor as Tom Hanks is. The main attention should be paid in this respect to the rainy, foggy scene when comes to the final part of Sullivan's Road, Kersner 138. Thus, the implementation of the overall gist along with real events in Chicago of 1930s provides a genuine coloring of the plot along with the transition of the corrupt and unlawful city's atmosphere at the time. The fact that Road to Perdition was filmed in Chicago delineates the effect of the truthfulness of different scenes in the movie, Ebert 558. Thus, the initial idea of the script fits the genre of the film with points on drama and crime. The setting of the film and its particular attributes as for guns, money, banks, murders is typically coherent with the idea about America in times after Black Tuesday. Thereupon, the audience for this movie should be aware of the events following the Great Depression in America. It is vital to know that unlawfulness of gangs cannot be stopped or reduced totally. It was a time of turmoil that gave ground to anybody daring to reach the top. It could be done therefore through going along the road to perdition. Such an assumption is straightforward for those who adore movies of this kind. However, the difference lies in the set of values that are predominant for the main character. The setting and visuals are constructed so as a viewer gets deep into the uniqueness of the film by the way the entire perspective is incorporated. The script follows the aim of attaining the effect of logical end-ups in the story of Michael Sullivan. However, his pathway is full of unexpected traps and tragedies which give him more motivation to get around to Rooney. Moreover, he makes Al Capone and Rooney lose their temper by embezzling syndicates' money from banks. This has been done by the main character in order to evoke justice by dint of moral and economical ruination of the mob emperors of Chicago in the early 1930s. The anti-hero who is Connor Rooney is full of the same violent attitudes towards Sullivan but based on the initially warm relationships between his father John Rooney, Paul Newman, and Michael Sullivan Sr. The plot is very fascinating, but it is better to be ready for the psychopathic intentions of Harlan Maguire, Jude Law. Being an assassin, moreover, hired by Frank Nitti, Stanley Tucci, he terrifies by bloody cross-shootings in which he takes the main part. These characters move a viewer toward an idea of how loose gangsters were at that time. Everything was interrelated, so to speak. The audience should get ready to get high rates of emotional excitement while watching this film. It is not that it is the same piece of cake as compared to other gangster films. By contrast, Sam Mendes worked out the algorithm of constantly ascending rage in the development of actions in the film. At this point, the rainy scene culminates the cruelty and the main episode in the movie. It is a sort of payback that characterizes the purpose of Sullivan's living on Earth at the moment. On the other hand, it is the compilation of the whole idea in the film patterned with symbolic dark colors and watershed figures of the gangsters at a deal, Weiner 117. Hence, the setting of the movie is appropriate for the mature in terms of the decadent era of the Depression in the history of America. However, the film is unique for incorporating specific scenes of violence and speculation of the main characteristics that make the movie different. It is especially seen on the idea of making it similar to Lone Wolf and Cub. That is the difference. The fact that the movie was translated from the graphical novel by Max Allan Collins should erect special concerns. The question is that the novel was in turn influenced by Japanese almost similar kind of graphical art in literature, known as manga or gekiga. Thus, the scope of characters in a graphical novel by Collins is mainly composed of the bad guys who seek personal ideals by means of unmerciful murders. Focusing on the emotional disgust, the author wanted to hypothesize the affection on the main hero after being broken down by the disaster of his whole life. In fact, it is something like having been described in Tarantino's saga Kill Bill 1, 2. That is Gekiga in part. On the other hand, Rodriguez's Sin City personifies the same ideals and setting but in darker colors and with more horrible evaluation. Sam Mendes could have dared to implement the peculiarities of manga, Lone Wolf and Cub, particularly, in order to make it different compared to what other directors were excited to do in their films. The idea is that running the gamut of American history, Mendes found out noteworthy features in it. Of course, it was influenced by the facts which took place in Chicago in the early 1930s. Thus, to better get the idea of the movie, one should take a glimpse at both Collins's and Mendes's creations. Comparing them and dwelling on their main ideas, one can get the gist of the reasons for publishing graphic novels, on the one hand, and screening the movie, on the other hand. All in all, it is the characters that resemble many features of pulp fiction in this movie. Along with the graphic novel, it creates a juxtaposition with what makes Road to Perdition that unique. The overwhelming idea of the novel and movie, in particular, might be understood through the fact that it is a struggle between Michael Sullivan and Harlan Maguire. It is a fight between assassins of different ranks. Being a hitman, Sullivan becomes even more severe as pertaining to his enemies. He sees no other way for Rooney as to be dead as soon as possible. This motivates him to scope out the best way to get the bosses of the Chicago mob. It may be strange that Sullivan is extremely successful in doing what he plans to do. The same is in terms of Collins's graphic novel, which to a degree responds to the manga Lone Wolf and Cub. To extend the frontiers of rhetoric on Road to Perdition, one should also encompass the meaning of the title. It is thought of to be the way to silence and safety after the inevitable dangers of life. After the fatal deaths of almost the whole family of Sullivan, he takes the advantage of different ways to trade for Connor Rooney. That was the sticking point that illuminates the vengeance growth and presumably revengeful person, meaning Sullivan's occupation. Now he heads out, with the younger Michael, on the road to the place of the title, literally hell, Fairbanks 302. This feature of the main hero, his decisiveness, proves his personal success in reaching out to what was planned primordially, even paying a high price in blood and in his own life. Such like motives are plain in graphic novels. Thus, to counter the influence of both authors, Max Allan Collins and Sam Mendes, derived from the earlier founded trends of manga. By dint of Mendes's work, Road to Perdition has gained its popularity with the audience more due to the rhetoric of the main heroes. There is no secret that every word and phrase incorporates a specific message of the director which is aimed at undergoing through a viewer's consciousness. To make it plain, each step of Michael Sullivan was adjusted with mature sharpness. In this respect, his words of blame and rage are reflected on the viewer's mind as metaphors of more varied life prospects. His sacrifice was worth it. It symbolizes the shock and the completion of Michael's destination on Earth. However, Mendes provides a sort of transformation by making Sullivan positively illuminated after his long way of vengeance. Nevertheless, it is done, for a viewer is considered to be ready to analyze Sullivan's past as a bygone failure. Deconstruction of the initially amoral theme into the story with no happy end for the main hero is what Mendes tries to achieve afterward. In classical gangster films screened in the 1940s or some later, there were no vivid external influences on the American cinematograph. In part, it was grounded on the absence of so attractive genres as the filmmaking industry has to date. The diversity of trends and genres in movies has now acquired international or global character. Thus, synthesizing various approaches, Sam Mendes could have implemented features of the drama of the time and significance of duty to be completed on time through the main character. The director of the film dared connect the historical data of the U.S., setting, main characters, colors, etc., in close adherence to rich and dramatic scenes genre, Gekiga. Road to Perdition is a story of a road trip. It is a story of fathers and sons. It is a story of a boy learning the ways of the world. It is a story of a man on a path to vengeance. But, above all, it is a story of perdition, which guarantees no rest for the wicked. The main character is Michael Sullivan Jr., a 12-year-old boy, whose curiosity led him to hide in his father's car one night when he went on a rendezvous. Much to his chagrin, he found out that his father was not some white-collar businessman, but a man with a dark secret staining his soul. Michael Sullivan, Tom Hanks, was a mob enforcer and consultant to Irish mob boss Mr. John Rooney, Paul Newman, who was the godfather of the Rock Island town. Daniel Craig was the over-entitled and insecure son of Mr. Rooney, with a bad habit of killing people without much ado. To make matters worse, Connor had accompanied Sullivan on the fateful night. Sensing the danger, perceived or real, he sprang into action without confiding with anyone in the mob family. What happened next rooted out Sullivan from Rock Island along with his son and sent him on a journey of survival and sabotage. There is not even a single scene which you can afford to miss in this game of hide-and-seek played between Sullivans, Connor, and McGuire, the sadist hitman, Jude Law, later hired by the mob family to preserve their interest. The entire story is narrated from Michael's perspective, and his innocence made the tone of the movie much heavier than had it been told by a grown-up. Tyler Hoechlin stole the show with his superb acting talent aided by the naivety and youth of his character. Paul Newman's character, as the mob boss, is kind, fragile, and practical, but unlike his son, not practical enough to kill a child. He is a family man and can be a direct successor of Don Corleone. His piercing blue eyes showed the remorse and grief over the turn of events which no other character had time to feel. His famous dialogue truly encapsulated the soul of the movie: "There are only murderers in this room, this is the life we chose, the life we lead. And there is only one guarantee, none of us will see heaven." Tom Hanks once again showed that he is nothing less than an exemplary actor. In an iconic scene, where he delivered a note to a debtor on behalf of Mr. Rooney, but is, unbeknown to him, the note that was to be his own death warrant. Without any exchange of words, the mob enforcer sensed what was going to happen in the next few seconds. Sam Mendes showed a clever use of silence and calmness as a medium to instill fear in the viewer. However, his character stayed in the background, as it ought to be the story of a father and a son. The mobman only came out to ensure survival for both. One missing point in the story is Michael Sullivan never showing any signs of grief on his family's death. Spoiler. Even during the bonding moments with his son, it felt that he was holding his emotions at the backseat. The only explanations is that he knew what was coming for him and he may not be there forever to protect his son. Jude Law is impeccable in his role as the hitman. Right from the first entry, he showed he will not shy away from gruesome killings and turn the dead bodies into artistic photographs. Daniel Craig's character is as flat as a pancake, the bad man we all love to hate. Even his death scene is shown as an impersonal obligation and an accessory to bring perdition on others. However, the true hero of the movie is its cinematic brilliance. With 3 Academy Awards and BAFTA Awards each to his name, Conrad Hall is still one of the most influential cinematographers in the world even after his death. In this movie, he proved again that camera work is as significant to the art of storytelling as the screenplay. The movie got 6 nominations at Academy Awards and won 4 Best Cinematography. This film. Directed by Sam Mendes. Screenplay by David Self. Based on Road to Perdition. Produced by Richard D. Zanuck. Starring Tom Hanks. Cinematography Conrad L. Hall. Edited by Jill Bilcock. Music by Thomas Newman. Production company The Zanuck Company. Distributed by DreamWorks Pictures. Released at July 12, 2002, United States. Running time 117 minutes. Country: United States. Language: English. Budget: $80 million. Box office: $183.4 million.